Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Fresha and I'm interested in learning how to live a happier, healthier, more creative life. And since you clicked on the video, I'm hoping that you and I can learn how to build the lives that we want together. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about favorites. Hakono. Yeah. This is my first favorites video ever, so we'll see how I do. I don't know. Favorites videos are some of my favorite videos on YouTube. I love seeing what people spend their hard-earned money on, what stays in their makeup drawers or on their bookshelves. I typically watch. Kono, what are you doing? Excuse me. Are you okay? You can hide if you want. Boop. So I wanted to do a little bit of a twist on, would you like to come sit here? Okay, good job. So I wanted to do a little bit of a personal twist on the favorites videos that I usually watch. I'm sure that plenty of YouTubers do this style of favorites. I just don't come across them in my feed. So if you guys do have recommendations for YouTubers that have favorites videos that extend outside of products, please make sure to comment them down below. I would love to discover them and watch those videos. And so I wanted to expand my favorites list to things outside of product. I typically watch favorites videos that are really product driven, so either beauty or like snacks or clothing. And while you'll certainly see those things on my list, I like to know what people are into even outside of like their consumer habits. Like I like to know what people are reading and watching and listening to. So I want my favorites video to be a little bit more holistic and include things like books and music and films and interesting articles that I've read alongside products that I have tried and love. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So first up, we have makeup, fashion, products, the type of things you would normally see in a favorites video. So first, we have this. Dr. Singha's mustard bath. So this stuff has become my go-to for my evening baths. So much to my own surprise, I have become a bath person, capital B, capital P. A therapeutic blend with essential oils of wintergreen, eucalyptus, rosemary, and thyme. And I literally feel like I am at a spa. Like the eucalyptus and spearmint open up my sinuses. I feel like I'm like dipping my body in wasabi in the best possible way. If you're not a wasabi fan, then like I don't know what to tell you, but I'm almost done with this. But I think this is probably like the third or fourth time I've bought this, and I actually really like the packaging. I feel like you don't see this electric blue that much, especially paired with the yellow. I think it could run the risk of looking like very varsity. I like it. It feels medicinal. I know that's probably the point. As someone who works in packaging, like I'm almost certain that is the point. It's also a nice departure from the now homogeneous, like neutral toned, minimalist packaging that most of my bath stuff has. This really stands out and it makes me feel really good. I really look forward to taking a bath every night because of this. So yeah, this stuff is killer. If you're a bath person and you haven't tried this, highly recommend. Okay, so next, I am one of those people who has like 30 perfumes saved to various wish lists, and I never buy any of them. The perfumes I do have, I love and I'll use fairly regularly, but for some reason I have a hard time making the call on buying new ones. However, perfumes are some of my favorite things to shop for in store and online. It is to me just such a quintessential luxury and a treat and an indulgence to buy a fragrance for yourself. I had been looking at the Maison Louis Marie perfumes for almost a year, and every time I saw a friend or a coworker had a bottle, I would stop them and ask them what they thought of brand and the scents, and almost always people would say that they loved the scents, they loved the brand, and they highly recommended them, and yet still I could not hit checkout on my cart until I realized they had these. Let's see. I am not a good YouTube. Like, how do people do this? I'm also shooting on my phone, by the way. That's as good as it's gonna get. So these are little samplers, but they are perfume oils. I'm pretty new to perfume oils, but my friend explained to me that they typically last longer scent-wise and usage-wise in a bottle because the oil sticks to your skin better than a water-based fragrance. I bought 4 of these on the Maison Louis Marie website. The smaller ones cost about $15, and I swear to God, they last forever. I've been using one of these, not this one, but I've been using another one almost every single day for the past several months since I got them, and I swear the product level has barely moved. I love this product. I love that you can get them in a smaller, more affordable size so that you can test out which scents that you like. Like, there was a scent that I wasn't a huge fan of for myself, but I thought that my friend would like it, so I gave it to her. I also love that with the smaller size, it's easy to pop into bags of any shape and size. Unlike full perfume bottles, you don't have to worry about these breaking as much because they're so light. They're not as heavy as a full perfume bottle. I love to carry these around in my purse because it helps the transition between work and after work plans. I can just top off my perfume and go. And the scents themselves are really beautiful. So if you're looking to start playing around with fragrances or add some more to an existing collection, I would definitely recommend checking out the Maison Louis Marie perfume oil minis. Okay, so next, my stylist, hi Kelly, only uses davines products. I wasn't familiar with the brand before I started going to her, but after looking them up, they seem like a pretty cool brand. You know, they're an older family-run Italian brand. They started out as a cosmetics research lab, but today they are a certified B Corp that focuses on sustainability in the beauty and hair spaces. So the first davines product I got from my stylist was actually their davines. This is a texturizing spray last summer, which I loved because it encouraged my hair's natural wave without weighing it down. But every time my stylist did my hair, she would use this. And it's the Davines all-in-one OI milk oil. And eventually I had to cave and ask her what it was and if it was available for sale because, one, it smells so good. I don't even know what is this scent. How would I describe this? Okay, I don't know. Now that I'm under pressure, I'm at a loss for words. But I love the smell of this. And my hair has literally never been softer. So what I do is after I step out of the shower, after washing my hair, I will towel dry my hair a little bit and then I'll spray this on and then I'll let my hair air dry with this in it. And I cannot even tell you, when I use this, my hair legit feels fake. Like, it feels like fur. It is so sexy. Like, I literally turn myself on when I rub my own fingers through my own damn hair. If that doesn't tell you you need to buy this product, I don't know what does. Okay, so the next thing on my list is like a little uncharacteristic of me. I mean, not really. Like, I do love lipstick. It's a lipstick, or more like a lip color. It is the Smashbox Always On Long Wear Matte. That's a long name. Always On Long Wear Matte Liquid Lipstick. Always On Long Wear Matte Liquid. Always On Long Wear Matte Liquid Lip. It is the Smashbox Always On. It is the Smashbox Always On Long Wear Matte Liquid Lipstick in Out Loud. That's a long ass name. They should shorten that because way too long. It's not that it's uncharacteristic of me, it's just that I'm not someone who normally wears a ton of makeup. Like, I love makeup and I feel like I'm getting more adventurous with it as I get older, but I've never been someone who wears a full, you know? Like, I never like beat my face to the gods. Especially with COVID, at least everyone I know really pulled back on their makeup routines. And so the fact that I am here before you today talking about how much I love this lip color really should say something. I mean, it's not just the color, even though the color, it's called Out Loud, is this beautiful deep burnt orange. This is within like my ideal color palette. Like, this works really well with my skin tone. I have like a bit of a lighter tan, especially in the winter, but I can get very, very dark. Like, my skin kind of deepens into like a really nice brown in the summer, and I'm sure that this color will work regardless of season for my skin tone. And it's not just the color. I will say, you know, maybe it's because I'm a makeup noob, but I was so impressed with this formula. I am so impressed with this formula. I'm not sure I've ever used a formula quite like this or quite this nice that really checked off all the boxes for me. It's truly long wear, but it's not drying, which I often struggle to find in a formula. Once this is dried, I can even apply a little chapstick on top, and I feel like the color doesn't slide around that much, which I usually struggle with, especially in the corners of my mouth. So yeah, if you are looking for a reprieve from your mask wearing drudgery and you want a nice lip color, honestly, I'll even wear this at home. Like, it makes me feel that good. If you're looking for a nice lip color that you don't have to constantly reapply, but that doesn't dry out your lips and has a really beautiful color, I would look into this line from Smashbox. Okay, so next we have the Kosas Airbrow Tinted Clean Volumizing Brow Gel. Dude, these makeup products their names are way too long. Like, damn. Like, I'm sure it has to do with their SEO and their search ranking in Sephora, but like, it's simply too much. So I used to be a huge stan of Glossier's Boy Brow, just like everybody else and their mother on the internet. But I bought this at the end of 2021 because while I love Boy Brow, I hate having to place a separate order to my Sephora order. Like, it just is not, it doesn't make sense to me. Unless you are like a small indie brand that hasn't been picked up by Sephora yet. Like, I just don't see the point in placing another order that needs to travel across the country to me when I can just compress all of my items into one Sephora order. I mean, beyond Boy Brow, the only other Glossier product I use constantly was maybe Milky Jelly Cleanser. Okay, actually, and Halo Scope, and occasionally Brow Flick. Okay, so I guess like I do still use Glossier products, but I hate having to place a different order. Like, Glossier, get it together. I know you want your own channel and you want to control your brand, but like, come on, man. I'm not trying to have another truck drive across the country to deliver my 3 teeny tiny makeup items just because like you don't want to be in Sephora. So anyway, I started using Kosas. I mean, first of all, I don't know if this is true, but it's how I feel. I feel like Airbrow is bigger than Boy Brow, which, like, I'm sure the difference is negligible, but it's the thought that counts for me. Second, the formula is pretty much the exact same to Boy Brow for me. I thought I would hate the bright pink packaging, but I actually think it's kind of fun now. The only material difference for me is their spoolie seems to be a standard size spoolie, whereas the Boy Brow one has that little tiny spoolie that seems specific to that product. You guys know what I'm talking about? Anyway, that doesn't make a huge difference to me. It might make a difference to people who have thinner or smaller brows and need that control, but for me, I have pretty normal eyebrows, so the spoolie does not make a huge difference for me. I will say Glossier's smaller spoolie feels more designed to me, but functionally I've had no problem switching over to the Kosas Airbrow, and I'm saving myself time, I'm saving myself another box that doesn't need to be sent across the country, and I'm racking up Sephora points. So that's that. On the topic of throwing things in my bag, I am obsessed with this mini fanny pack from Patagonia. And it's a little ridiculous because this is literally like the 3rd fanny pack from Patagonia I own, but it's also the tiniest. My fanny packs have just gotten progressively smaller and smaller. This is part of Patagonia's Black Hole product line. I also own 2 other things from this line. When they say Black Hole, it is pretty aptly named. I first got this fanny pack because I was working on a big photo shoot that was going to be an all-day commitment, and I knew I was going to need to carry around a bunch of key things and have different pockets, but I also needed to be able to get it dirty and, you know, be able to be rough with it. Like, I didn't want to be walking around set with a nice leather purse while we were working with the art department on a bunch of different props and like fake liquid. So I have this Black Hole fanny pack, and the other bag that I typically use in my day-to-day is an APC Moon bag. I don't have it with me right now, but I would say if this was put side by side with the APC Moon bag, the APC Moon bag would probably be like 1.5, maybe even close to 2 times the size of this. Not quite 2 times the size, but certainly bigger than this. And the Black Hole fanny pack holds just as much, if not more stuff. I think it's something to do with the design of this pack. I don't know what they do. I think the material they use is like some type of nylon, which means that it's naturally stretchy, but it also is super strong and like water and stain resistant. Yeah, I think also with like traditional leather purses, you kind of have to stack things because the material doesn't give as much, whereas this, like, it feels like the bag moves as you like Tetris things into it. Anyway, this has pretty much replaced my purses. Like, my style is very quickly evolving into retired dad. Like, I'm walking around in my loose jeans, my loose button-ups, my old Birkenstocks, and now I'm just walking walking around offering strangers chapstick and gum and CBD mints out of this tiny bag. Okay, now moving into books. So the first book on my list is called Addicted to the Monkey Mind by J.F. Benoist. And I read this book late last year, and it was such an eye-opening read for me that I've recommended it to many friends and many family members. At first glance, this book could seem obvious to the know-it-alls in the room, but the way the author J.F. Benoist, who is also a clinical psychologist, describes the anxious mind chatter that I know many of us suffer from made me feel so seen and comforted. Benoist essentially talks about how early in childhood we develop coping mechanisms to deal with the world. As we move through it, as we learn more about it, as we, realize our parents aren't infallible, as we get hurt, etc., etc. And some of those coping mechanisms actually become maladaptive as we move into adulthood. So while, say, learning to stay quiet when your parents are angry might have benefited you as a little kid, especially if you grew up in an unsafe or an unstable environment, but as an adult, that coping mechanism can often develop into a life of its own and might manifest in your life as avoiding confrontation even when it's necessary, choosing partners who are similarly unstable, hyper-rationalizing your feelings instead of allowing yourself to just go through the motions of feeling them. Now, this idea of coping mechanisms arising out of early childhood development is certainly not a new concept. It's one you can find in a lot of different books on childhood development, and it's also one of the biggest tropes I feel about psychology in pop culture. However, one of the big things from the book that made me appreciate it more than others is its use of empathy in the self-exploration process. The author also uses these archetypal characters who you follow from their first session that they attend with Dr. Benoist all the way to the end when they leave therapy. This way you're painted a clear visual on what the road ahead looks like, which I think can be really helpful for people who are unfamiliar with or hesitant around the idea of going to therapy. Okay, so next up, I have the Flow State podcast. I have been listening to this podcast for several months while I work. Each episode usually starts out with a block of binaural beats, which is meant to prime the brain for focus. And binaural beats is basically a sound recording method in which two microphones are set up to create a 3D stereo sound experience for the listener. I could be wrong on this, don't quote me on it, but binaural beats use different sound frequencies for the left and the right ear because each ear can receive different frequencies, but the brain perceives them as one frequency. There's like this whole subculture around it, and some people believe that it can be applied as like a clinical treatment for anxiety and depression. It's called binaural beats therapy, but the studies on it so far, as far as I know, and I don't know that there have been many, so don't quote me on it, but the studies on it so far have been inconclusive. Anyway, like I don't really listen to the podcast for the binaural beats intro. After that binaural block is usually a pretty solid playlist of mainly instrumental songs that's just like good music to work or study to. Honestly, when I script for YouTube or when I go have work blocks for my job, I'm usually listening to the Flow State podcast or Thai Dream Pop, which I'll talk about later. Okay, so I know I'm about 2 years late on this next one, but I mean, give me a break. I only just got back into reading fiction, even though this book isn't fiction, it actually happened, so maybe it's more like personal narrative. Anyway, the next thing on my list is the book Crying in H-Mart by Michelle Zauner. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this book and don't need to hear more about it from me, but I wanted to shout it out because after I read it, I called my mom every day for like 5 days. If you don't know the premise of Crying in H-Mart, it follows the protagonist Michelle Zauner, who I will say you also find out later in the book is the artist Japanese Breakfast, which is wild to me. But you follow the protagonist Michelle Zauner as she seeks to bridge the gap between herself and her Korean mother when her mother is diagnosed with an aggressive cancer. The book is beautiful, but also pretty heartbreaking. And honestly, when I was reading it, I stopped a few times just to like cry in my pillow. I think Michelle Zauner does such a good job of portraying the space that can be so hard to bridge between first-gen kids and their immigrant parents, and how certain cultural customs, in Zauner's case it was food, can often be the stand-in for the words that we don't share or don't know how to say to each other. As a first-gen kid with an Asian mom and an American dad, I really related to Zauner's internal struggle with her own identity. I don't know, reading it made the younger, fresh in me feel really seen and validated. It also made me feel incredibly grateful for my parents and reminded me just how much I missed them. I haven't seen or hugged my parents in almost 2 years now because of the pandemic and the lockdown, so I'm really looking forward to seeing them soon, especially after reading this book. Okay, so the next book I have on my list is... So this cookbook is Cooking at Home by David Chang and Priya Krishna. So honestly, I got this, I don't know, a couple months ago, and it's a pretty fun format. I think the way that they wrote this was that basically Priya Krishna was standing in David Chang's kitchen at home, and he just basically cooked the way he normally would at home for his friends and family, doing all the weird shit that probably wouldn't be acceptable in a professional kitchen, and using methods and tools that like high-minded foodies would normally reject, such as using a microwave for almost every part of the meal. And I think as he did this, Priya Krishna took notes, and then they both worked on recipe development. As you read through the book, it's funny, like you'll see, let me see if I can find one. So there will be an intro from Dave Chang on like a recipe or a section, and then there will be a little comment from Priya on the same page. So each of the co-authors, they're noted by their initials, so DC or PK. And you can see here, like up here is Dave Chang and down here is Priya Krishna. And honestly, it's like pretty chaotic, but it's chaotic good. It's a fun kind of chaotic. And they also have like fun essays from like food scientists and like talking about microwaves, and it's just a really like lighthearted approach to cooking that I really appreciate. It's like if two of your friends were professional chefs and came into your house and actually told you how you needed to cook using the things that are available in your kitchen. I really appreciated the approach of this book because there's no glorified staged photos of like the cookbook co-authors just getting back from the farmer's market with perfect light pouring into their, you know, open concept kitchen with a mesh shopping tote with seasonal ingredients like artfully spilling out. They talk about like microwaves and freezing things and just cooking in a really practical way that's also fun. And as I get older, I've become a lot more invested in my own health and getting better at cooking, and this book scratches that itch for me in a way that most cookbooks don't, because I think most cookbooks for me feel like other people's fantasies about what cooking should be or what they want it to be. And while it's nice to suspend disbelief once in a while and like share that fantasy with someone who is more skilled than you, for the most part, like this book is actually about what cooking is and what it looks like in our lives. And I really appreciate that. I feel like I'm gonna get more use out of this cookbook than like the past like 4 cookbooks I've bought. So last book, and it's also another cookbook on the list. So this cookbook is called Filipinx, and I bought it at one of my favorite local bookstores, Skylight Books, for those of you who live in LA, especially East LA. So as I was talking about with crying in H Mart, it's just so wild for me to like be holding a book made in America, bought at a bookstore that I go to regularly, that is dedicated to my mother's cuisine, my Lola's food, my aunt's food, the food that was comfort for me growing up and is so deeply entwined in my identity and my relationship with food and how I like to eat. This book is by Angela dimayuga and ligaya mishan. Dimayuga, I'm pretty sure, develops recipes for the New York Times. That's where I recognized her name when I saw this cookbook. I think she published the first Filipinx recipe that like I personally had ever seen in the New York Times. It was either for pork adobo or I can't remember what the dish was, but I remember scrolling through the app past all the pastas and the roasts and sandwiches and salads, and then seeing this Filipino dish and like my thumb just stopping the scroll. And I was just so excited to see a food that I had grown up with that is the definition of comfort food for me in a place where I don't normally see that part of my identity reflected back to me. The New York Times reflects, you know, my American identity or my liberal or progressive identity or the educated part of my identity, but it's never reflected the Filipina immigrant, born in the Philippines, child of an immigrant, third culture kid, part of my identity. It didn't reflect that back to me until very recently, until the past couple of years. So this book is full of recipes for my childhood, and as I was flipping through the pages, I saw recipes for dishes that I had like totally forgotten about but ate regularly as a kid, especially when my mom took me to turon, which means like point in in Filipino and is like a standard style of like restaurant in Filipino culture. It's where Filipinos will congregate and serve their food. And to be honest, like there are some key Filipino dishes that I learned to cook for myself and I will still cook regularly, like sinigang, because that's my favorite Filipino food and truly the definition of comfort food for me. You know, as with many other cuisines, Filipino food is really built to serve a crowd. It's built to serve large families. It's economic. It's very industrious and creative in how it uses ingredients. I love to cook, but I am not good enough at cooking to understand how to like scale ingredients without compromising certain elements of taste or texture. And so having this book makes me so excited, because I think that Dimayuga and Mishan worked to actually scale the recipes that most first gen, second gen kids don't know how to scale for themselves. And as anyone who comes from an Asian parent knows, they don't really use recipes. Asian cooking is so much about proportion that like you actually have to be quite adept at, you know, flavor and being really good about tasting a recipe as you go in order to learn how to scale it. But this does it for me, and if you're filipinx, I definitely recommend buying this book. Honestly, even if you're not filipinx, even if you don't know Filipinos, even if you've never tried our food, you should buy it. You know, discover the new cuisine. Filipino food is so delicious and it's quite unlike other cuisines. It's a mix between Southeast Asian food, so think like Vietnamese, Thai, Malaysian, with influences of Japanese and Chinese culture mixed in. We have a lot of pickled things, as you see in Korean food, but also because we were colonized by the Spanish, we share a lot of characteristics with Mexican food. The Philippines is a hot and tropical climate, which means that we've had to learn how to preserve our food. So pickling and vinegar and acid play a huge role in the cuisine, as does fatty braised meats, tropical fruits, and lots of seafood. So I'm so grateful to have this book in my kitchen now. I'm so proud to see my food in such a beautiful book published by such talented chefs, and I hope you guys check it out as well. Okay, so I feel like I didn't discover that much music these past couple months, but I did have two recommendations. So the first is Asia Simone. I first heard of Asia Simone when I went to this art collective that the photographer on my team belonged to. Anyway, the collective had this big exhibition and they had painters, photographers, mixed media artists, and in the middle of the exhibition, they showed like 4 films made by artists in their collective, and they were incredible. If I can find the links to those videos, I will link them down below because they were so beautiful and so well done. Anyway, one of the films was a series of music videos from the artist Asia Simone, who has this gorgeous voice. I don't know if she is a contralto, but it's this deep, velvety, beautiful voice. And the songs she showcased that night were from her album that came out in 2020 called Happy Hour. And after that night, I played her album on repeat. It jumps between fun to poignant to sad, but all the while acknowledging. And to be honest, I had to stop listening to it at some points in lockdown, because when the world was still uncertain, all of the emotions at the same time was a little bit much for me. But nonetheless, it's still an album I pull out when I'm driving across the city at golden hour and I'm feeling some type of way. And then the next thing, I don't know if this is a recommendation so much as an update. It seems like a strange thing to recommend because it's so particular, but I have become obsessed with the genre Thai dream pop. You know, it's the style of music that I typically like to listen to. You know, it has these like easy guitar chords and like dreamy synths, but it's all in Thai. It's perfect for when I'm working or painting or doing something with my hands, because it's just like such a vibe and it's beautiful, but it's also mellow. And I want to learn more about the artists, but I don't get distracted by the lyrics because I obviously don't speak Thai. And so if you're looking for something that fits that bill, that's really beautiful to listen to, but is not necessarily lyric driven, then I'll link a couple playlists down below. Okay, so on to the last section, film and TV. Okay, so my first recommendation in this section is for a French TV show called The Bureau. Le Bureau. Okay, so I got real into this show starting last summer through the start of this year. It's 5 seasons, so there are a lot of episodes. I'm gonna sound really cringy when I say this, but it's kind of like a French Homeland or 24. I really hate comparing shows from other countries to American shows, but I mean, listen, it's rainy and it's cold here in LA and my body's not working. Oh my God, do you see that squirrel? Oh. We made eye contact. Anyway, so the show follows this agent named Malotru, who works for the French version of the CIA, the DGSE, or as they pronounce it through the show, it's like DGSU. So as he returns home from an assignment abroad, things get sticky as he tries to reintegrate back into normal society, back with his family, back at the DGSU headquarters, as secrets from his time undercover start to cause trouble for him and his colleagues. The character development and writing on this show is terrific. I was so delighted to see this genre that I typically associate with Americans. So like undercover agents, you know, pulse quickening action, written and shot from a French perspective. You know, in true French fashion, they take their time with the plot and the characters. And, you know, while I compared it to like Homeland and 24 earlier, it's not actually like those shows which rely on like adrenaline pulsing cliffhangers and compressed timelines for the characters. The Bureau is certainly suspenseful, but the show takes its time compared to its American counterparts. And as a viewer, it left me feeling engaged but not exhausted. So I'm a huge fan of international crime and spy thrillers. I loved Killing Eve and I loved Narcos. I have rewatched those shows multiple times over. So if you're into those shows, I would suggest giving Le Bureau a shot. Okay, so next on this list is the Wes Anderson film, The French Dispatch. I saw The French Dispatch last year after years of not seeing a Wes Anderson film. I used to be really charmed by his, you know, highly styled sets and like Snicket-esque characters. But I fell off sometime around Moonrise Kingdom, which when I looked it up on the internet, it was like almost 10 years ago, which is kind of crazy. Maybe it's just because I've been off the Darjeeling Express for almost 10 years now, but I was so delighted by The French Dispatch. I think it was also seeing a fresher cast of characters that I didn't already associate with Wes Anderson, like Léa Seydoux, Benicio del Toro, Jeffrey Wright, and of course, Timothée Chalamet. It made me appreciate the style and discipline with which Wes Anderson like painstakingly builds his worlds. To see these new faces enter and immediately find a home in those worlds, I don't know, just reminded me, just made me really appreciate the precision and discipline he applies to his visual style. I think that, you know, you're hard pressed to find a director with that degree of commitment to his visual style. So if you're looking for a fun film for a casual movie night with friends who are like very visually driven, I think this would be a really fun pick. It is so dark. It's 1 o'clock. Like, this is crazy. This is not why I moved to Southern California. This is not the journey I'm on. Okay, so speaking of Léa Seydoux, I saw her in another film when I went to the Toronto Film Festival in September for my 30th birthday. So the movie was called France, and while it got mixed reviews from critics, I personally really loved it. The film follows a young, incredibly successful, basically superstar TV journalist who shares a name with her home country. Her name is France Demeur. I'm fucking that up. Her name is France. So after a jarring accident where she accidentally runs her car into a bicycle delivery person, France Demeur is shaken across all areas of her life, professionally, personally, psychologically. So the film is pretty funny at times, but it gets like really dark at others, like inexplicably dark. The whole movie was in French, so I'm sure I missed quite a bit of subtext in terms of the humor and social commentary, but it seemed to be a commentary on modern celebrity, online stardom culture, and how pervasive and corrosive it is on one's sense of well-being and one's sense of self. In addition to an unusual storyline and really pointed themes around modern fame, the movie was really beautifully shot, and the wardrobe styling was like A+. I remember saying to my friends over and over when we were watching the film that the first thing I was gonna do when I got out of the movie was to look up the costume designer because it was incredible. By the way, the costume designer is Alexandra Charles, for any movie nerds out there. Yeah, in this movie, to me, Léa Seydoux was such a treat. I've seen so many movies with her this past year, so if you're looking for a contemporary film to watch with your Francophile friends, I think France is as as good a choice as any. I actually just realized like all of my recommendations were French. I swear to God, I'm not a Francophile. I didn't realize that all of them were French. Okay, so the last thing on my list is my AMC A-list subscription, baby. A couple months ago, got a membership to the AMC Stubs A-list membership. Like, what the fuck is up with these long names? I got a membership to the AMC Stubs A-list, and you guys, I'm obsessed with it. I know theaters are dead, blah, 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 and whatever. But let me tell you, after lockdowns eased, you know what one of the first things I did was get my little butt to a movie theater. Too bright. Gosh. Now too dark. I didn't care. Once I was vaccinated, I was double masked. I had my Whoppers and my red vines snuck into my purse, snuck into my Patagonia black hole mini fanny pack. And I was ready to go. The AMC Stubs A-list subscription is like $20 a month, which is definitely one of the pricier subscriptions I have in my budget. But when I think about how many movies I see in a month, it definitely makes sense for my lifestyle, especially since I live in Los Angeles, a city where an average ticket price for one movie can go for like $15. Does anyone remember MoviePass? That fucking dumpster fire that we all affectionately called MoviePass? I was so fucking into MoviePass, but it was so hard to actually use, which I guess that was like obviously important to like what would eventually come of MoviePass, but I'm happy to announce that this is not that. With AMC Stubs, you can use your pass to see up to 3 movies a week in an AMC theater. I definitely don't use up all 3 passes in a week because I don't have that much free time, but that's okay because I still usually go once or twice a week. When I calculate it, even if I were to only go to matinees, which are still around $7 here in LA, save for select theaters here and there, I'd still be spending $28 a month. So I'm happy to have the convenience of a membership so I don't have to stick to matinees. I know I'm AMC and I like the experience they provide, and it's nice to have the movie going process be smoothed out with just a monthly membership and an app. Like sometimes I'll get out of work and I'm like so stressed and I need to get out of my own head, and I'm like, you know what? Gonna go see a movie. All right, so that concludes this video of my seasonal favorites. It was my first one, so if it was boring or bad, please be generous with me. I'll get better. But if you guys did like it and you found it helpful, please make sure to like and subscribe. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.